Your phone lights up. You see the message. You read it twice. And then you put the phone face down on the table and stare at the ceiling. You're not angry. You're not busy. You just can't. You can't explain why responding feels like lifting something heavy. Why being reachable, even to people you love, sometimes feels like standing in the middle of a room with no walls, nowhere to retreat, nowhere to just be without someone being able to find you. So you turn it off. Last scene, all read receipts, all of it, gone. And here's the thing nobody talks about. It works. You feel the tension in your chest ease by about 30% the moment you do it. The world stops tracking you. You get to exist without being watched. Most people would call that antisocial. Some would call it avoidant. A few people in your life have called it worse. But what if it's not a flaw in your character? What if it's your nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do, decades before you ever downloaded the app? There's a concept in psychology called hypervigilance to social exposure. It sounds clinical. It is. But what it describes is deeply human. When we grow up in environments where being seen led to consequences, criticism, disappointment, emotional withdrawal, conflict, the brain learns something fast. It learns that visibility is a liability. That when people know where you are, what you're doing, whether you've seen their message, you become accountable to their emotional state. And if you weren't safe in that accountability as a child, you learn to disappear. This isn't weakness, this is adaptation. Your autonomic nervous system, the part of you that decides fight, flight, or freeze before you've even formed a conscious thought, cataloged that information and built a reflex around it. Stay hidden. Stay safe. Oh, control what they can see. Turning off last scene isn't rudeness. For a lot of people, it's the closest thing to safety they know how to build. The problem is that the threat that trained that reflex is gone, but the reflex isn't. You probably don't describe yourself as anxious. You might describe yourself as private. But there are things you experience that you've never quite found the words for. Things you assume were just you. Like the way responding to a message, even a casual one, or even from someone you like, sometimes feels like a task you have to brace yourself for. Not because you don't care, because caring feels like obligation. An obligation feels like a door closing around you, or the way you check messages but don't reply. Not because you're playing games, because you need time to figure out what you actually feel before you perform feeling it for someone else. Or the way being unreachable for a few hours produces a specific kind of relief that you've never been able to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it, like finally exhaling. Or the way intimacy and suffocation feel like they live in the same neighborhood. So you love people, you love them fully, and then you need to vanish for 48 hours because love, without space, starts to feel like something closing around your throat. Or, and this one is quiet, this one is hard. The way you suspect that if people could track you too precisely, they'd eventually be disappointed. So you manage the information, you control the narrative, you make yourself a little harder to locate, because a person they can't fully find is a person they can't fully judge. You thought these were personality quirks. They're not. They're the logic of someone who learned, a long time ago, that being seen wasn't safe. Here's the question worth sitting with. How long are you planning to hide from people who actually want to find you? Not the people who made you feel unsafe, not the ones who taught you that visibility meant accountability meant punishment. Those people, whoever they were, whatever that looked like, aren't in your phone right now. The person texting you is someone who chose to be in your life, someone who notices when you go quiet, and you're managing them like a threat. The strategy you built, the disappearing, the offline status, the calculated visibility, it kept you functional when your environment was genuinely unpredictable. That strategy worked. It got you here. But fine isn't the same as free. Fine is what you say when someone asks how you are, and the honest answer is too complicated to explain in a hallway. Fine is the armor you put on so early you forgot you were wearing it, and now it's just your face. Just the way you move through the world, managing distance, keeping people at the exact radius where they can care about you but can't disappoint you. The armor kept you alive, but it's also why you sometimes feel completely alone in rooms full of people who love you. Nobody is coming to tell you it's safe to be seen now. There's no version of this where enough time passes and the reflex just dissolves. There's no relationship that will be patient enough, no person understanding enough. It's to undo what years of learned invisibility built inside you. You can find the most emotionally available person on earth, and your nervous system will still flinch at the idea of them knowing when you read their message. Healing doesn't come from outside. It comes from going back. This is what therapists sometimes call shadow work. The process of returning to the parts of yourself you had to abandon to survive. The version of you that wanted to be found, that wanted to reach back. Oh, that wanted to say, yes, I'm here, I see you, without calculating the cost first. That version of you didn't go anywhere. You just buried them somewhere quiet where they couldn't get you into trouble. The truth is this. You learned to disappear to protect yourself from people who couldn't handle you fully. But somewhere along the way, you also disappeared from yourself. And now, the privacy that once felt like freedom sometimes feels like solitary confinement you chose. That distinction matters. You're not broken. You're not difficult. You're not too much or too closed off, or fundamentally incapable of connection. You are someone who adapted brilliantly to a situation that required hiding, and now you're living in a different situation, still hiding, because no one ever told you it was okay to stop. It's okay to stop. Healing from this isn't a montage. It's not a week of journaling and a good therapist, and then you're suddenly someone who leaves their read receipts on and feels nothing. It's slower than that. And it involves feeling things that got frozen a long time ago. The grief of not being safe enough to be seen. The anger at having to build all these walls in the first place. The sadness for the version of you who just wanted someone to say, I see you and I'm staying. That grief is real. It belongs to you. And feeling it is not falling apart. It's the opposite. It's the first time in a long time that the armor comes off long enough for you to remember what it felt like before you put it on. You were someone before the hiding started. Before you learned to calculate distance, before you understood that being reachable meant being responsible for other people's emotions, before you figured out that disappearing, at least briefly, was the only way to give yourself back to yourself. That person is still in there, curious, open, wanting to connect without the constant overhead of managing what people can see. You don't have to turn your last scene back on tomorrow. That's not the point. The point is to start asking which walls you built for survival and which ones you're still living inside out of habit. To start telling the difference between solitude that restores you and isolation that's just fear wearing comfortable clothes. The world didn't make you this way because you were weak. It made you this way because you were paying attention, because you were smart enough to adapt, because somewhere in you there was a kid trying to make it through. That kid made it. And now it's your turn to go back for them. Your story doesn't start with the hiding. It starts with who you were before you decided hiding was the only option, and it ends with whoever you choose to become when you remember that you have other options now. Write that ending yourself.